Welcome to Farsight's currency forecasting project, where we use remote viewing to forecast various aspects of cryptocurrencies. Now, remote viewing is a mental process that allows for the transfer of information across time and space. I'm Courtney Brown, director of the Farsight Institute, and typically when we forecast some aspect of a cryptocurrency, we show the remote viewing sessions all recorded live on video, and then we give an analysis of how this translates into an economic forecast. But we don't normally explain how that translation is done in any detail, and that is what we are going to address in this educational video. For example, the remote viewers in our projects perceive something that is called a target, which is a place that has various things in it, such as structures, subjects, and so on. Now, the remote viewing is always done blind at Farsight, which means that the remote viewers are told nothing at all about a target when they do their sessions. Moreover, with our forecasting projects, the actual target that they are expected to perceive has not even been determined yet. With economic forecasting, that target is created using CGI software, and what is in the target is determined by a set of rules that correspond to the behavior of an economic aspect, such as a cryptocurrency's price during or at the end of a forecast period. So when we analyze the remote viewing data, we don't know the target, but we do know the rules that will be used to create the target. So, at the end of the forecast period, we look at the behavior of the economic element under consideration, such as the price of a cryptocurrency. And we then know what must go into the target during its creation using CGI software. So at the beginning of the forecast period, the remote viewing data are used to predict what the target will look like, and this in turn tells us what rules will be applied at the end of the forecast period to create the target. And this tells us what we need to know about the economic aspect in question. For this video, 3 of our remote viewers were assigned a normal tasking in our CICO series, which is a series that is used to forecast the adoption level of a new cryptocurrency by the end of the forecast period. What they did not know is that this CICO project was actually a demonstration project, or what some may call a test, and the cryptocurrency elements used in this test were already known. Now, there were 2 targets for this project, and we identified these 2 targets as CICO 4A and CICO 4B. The first economic element for CICO 4A was the adoption level of Bitcoin on December 11th, 2017. That was a date where Bitcoin reached a price of $19,357. In recent times, this was Bitcoin's peak, and its adoption level was really high. Lots of people worldwide wanted a chunk of Bitcoin on that day. Now, we use CGI software to mirror this very successful moment in Bitcoin's recent history using one of the sets of rules that we use in our currency project. Basically, there is a location, and there is lots of stuff at this location that reflects the high price, and thus the high level of adoption of Bitcoin. The exact target that was created for CICO 4A using CGI software is this image. And again, this target was created by applying the target creation rules that were established prior to the CICO project starting. Notice how many things are in this target. 3 non-surface structures, 5 large surface structures, subjects, foliage, water, mountains, hills, lots of stuff. So the idea was for the remote viewers to describe this target and most of the stuff at this target, and that would indicate how the target is created based on the cryptocurrency behavior. In this very simple example of target creation rules, the more stuff in the target, the higher the level of cryptocurrency adoption. You must remember that with remote viewing, the target does not need to exist at the time that the remote viewing sessions are done. So having the target created in the future is not a problem at all, something that we have researched heavily at Farsight, and which is a focus of many of our public projects that you can see on our website. So now let's look at the remote viewing sessions for this part of the project, all done totally blind. None of the viewers knew anything about the target image that you just saw. And we start with the session by Aziz Brown, followed by the session for Melena Hall, and finally, Princess Jeaneé.
This is the data for CICO Target 4A. So, here at the target, we have some higher peaked, steeper slopes, some mountainous irregular topography, goes into some hilly topography, and there are about 5 structures. It's very spaced out. These structures are spaced out with 2 subjects that are also spaced out. There's no focus gatherings. There's no crowd of any sort. It's not like a dense urban area. It's just 5 spaced out structures on a more regular terrain with 2 subjects that are not in any sort of group or together in any way. There is also a land-water interface where there is water over in that direction beyond the structures. There's more. All right. So there is a large expanse of water. The water extends very far in that direction. There is, of course, this land-water interface over here. And there are significant cloud dynamics above the water surface, as well as 3 non-surface structures. These 3 non-surface structures are also above the water, but they are not, this activity, this non-surface activity, does not occur above the structures over here that are surface structures, the 5 structures with the 2 subjects, and this mountain range actually ends up making sort of a circle around these surface structures. But when you get across the land-water interface and over to the water area, there is significant activity above the water in form of cloud dynamics and 3 non-surface structures that we will look into further. All right, so here we have a little picture of the watery base surface with the cloud dynamics above and object 1, 2, and 3. These objects are going to be referrals for the non-surface structures that I have illustrated over here. Object 1 and object 3 seem to have more angular shapes, like object 1 more of a cubish type of feature. It's gray. A lighter gray. Object 3 is also darker gray, but it's gray, and they're all hard surfaces, and object 3 sort of just has more of a rectangular shape. Object 2 seems to have the most intricate angles. It is more of a triangular shaped non-surface object structure, and to be more detailed with it, it sort of resembles this shape, almost like a jet or something like that, but that is the most detailed I perceived with object 2. And there is a bit more data for target 4A. Okay, so the final bits of data for target 4A include the description of these surface structures with the 2 subjects. They are concrete feeling structures. These structures have reddish-brown hues, and they're very solid. There's a lot of darkness in the sky over the entire target area, and that does conclude the data for target 4A.
Today we have 2 targets, CICO 4A and CICO 4B. Starting with CICO 4A. So here's my first visual for CICO 4A. I have 3 structures. I have subjects here. I have a regular topography, kind of like a hill ground, like ground is kind of steep. I'm also getting energetics between the subjects, and the structures are in a certain organized format where they're not next to each other. And that's all I have for my first visual for 4A. Moving on to my second visual for CICO 4A. Here's my second visual for CICO 4A. I have subjects Seems like they're walking and moving towards something. I have subjects and I have a lot of movement in the back, a lot of activity going on behind. The same structures, they're in a certain format, the way they were built in a more circular form, but they're all the same structure, but just different at the same time. And I have also peaks in the back. Here's my last visual for CICO 4A. I have mountaintop peaks. I have 3 main structures. They're not together. They're definitely more in circular format. I have subjects on the ground. I'm also getting 3 non-surface structures, so they're like flying objects above. And I'm also getting this energy right here in the middle. I'm getting this shape like it's twisting, but it's kind of like a tunnel shape right here. It's like it looks like smoke and wind. A lot of cloud dynamics around here, and just a lot of movement, a lot of waves, a lot of strength and winds and strength here. I'm just getting the feeling here. A lot of things are moving around, multi-directional kinetic energy, and it just feels like a big disaster. Can't really tell, but I'm getting the senses of a lot of winds and a lot of objects flying around, but mainly 3 objects up above, and these 3 structures down below, and they're, like I said, not in a straight line. They're really in like a circular formatted below on the ground with subjects below as well. And that's what I have for visual 3 for CICO 4A.
My basic gestalts here are land, structures, and movement. I have a mixture of land, natural and man-made land here, with elements of water in between and around the land, surrounding and in between the land. My first visual here shows just a few structures. My structure has square element to it with something coming out of the top and around the edges. My second visual here is a square structure that has mountains in the background or maybe around it somewhere, but there are multiple surface structures that I see. I see about 5 structures here that all have that similar shape here, and the structures seem to be a bit clustered around, so they're almost all facing each other in a circle here. They seem a bit deserted, and the dirt on the ground is very, very chalky here. In my third visual, I have those same structures, and at least one non-surface structure here that seems plus a mountain in the background. The non-surface structure seems to maybe be spinning, but it's not moving. It's more so hovering or just stationed right over it. While probing for fire and ice, I detected that the fire happens first and then it's followed by the ice.
So you can see that the remote viewing sessions for CICO 4A were generally quite accurate, with only minor variations across the remote viewers. The data reported by the remote viewers told us what we needed to know about Bitcoin on December 11th, 2017. It was highly adopted. Now let's contrast these results with a very different example that will allow you to see how these forecasts differentiate between successful and unsuccessful cryptocurrency pricing and adoption behavior. Our second target, CICO 4B, corresponds with the current level of adoption of a cryptocurrency that has done very poorly recently. I'm not going to mention that currency by name since I do not want to upset the people who work with that currency, but just know that the currency appears to be a failed currency from our perspective, one in which the present adoption rate is very, very low, and it does not seem likely to improve. Using our target creation set of rules for this CICO project, The target for CICO 4B is this image, created with CGI software. Notice that there is basically nothing but cold, snowy, icy land and mountains in this target, with a dark sky. Using our rules for the target creation process, this corresponds with a cryptocurrency that has failed. Now, before you see the sessions, I will make one comment about the interpretation of these data. When we examine remote viewing data, we look for characteristics that are repeated throughout the sessions, both in the preliminary sessions done with paper and pen as well as with the video sessions. But most remote viewers, even the very best remote viewers, make some mistakes where they think they perceive something at the target, but which is not actually there. This is particularly true in sessions where the target has very little in it, such as the current target. Since the viewers are trying to find stuff at a target and there's nothing there, they sometimes misinterpret their perceptions to think that an element is there when in fact it is not. We often can spot these mistakes and account for them in the analysis process. Those perceptions are called hanging perceptions, and this means that the perceptions are not supported elsewhere in the session and can probably be discounted. With the current session, sometimes you will see the viewers describe something that is not there, but that element will not appear in other corresponding session elements that would make sense in the context of a normal target. Indeed, sometimes the viewer can spot these elements in his or her own session, and this makes the viewer wonder if those elements are correct. For example, you will hear Aziz wonder out loud if a couple of his perceptions are hanging, since they do not match with the rest of the target descriptions. Here are the sessions for the target for CICO 4B.
Okay, so CICO 4B, at the target, there is a slightly taller, steeper feature over here. There is more of a sloped surface, irregular topography throughout, more hilly irregular topography, not like giant mountain ranges or anything, just more low level. It's very cold, and the base surface is this semi-hard, semi-mushy, sort of snow-like texture, ice and snow. Some points are harder than others, and just this very cold, barren, icy, snowy landscape that sort of just extends out in intense coldness, and there's wind through this entire target. And above, there is just this darkness that just expands across the whole sky above. And there is a bit more at the target, though. Okay, so I drew this lone subject in red, not because it was colored red, but just to make sure it was visible. It is by itself. There's only this one subject, and it is more of a hanging perception. The tall, slender structure over there is sort of a structure, not quite sure. It's very slender, almost like it shouldn't really be supported, but it's very slender, almost like it's just the wall or a side of what would be an actual structure or a piece of it. But it's a very tall, slender, hanging perception of a possible structure, also alone by itself in this barren, very cold landscape. There is significant wind dynamics blowing towards it, hitting it on one side, and once again, darkness above. There's a little bit more at the target, mainly just more irregular topography below at far distances, the same sort of irregular topography that we see here. Of course, at farther distances, there is nothing else, no structures, no subjects, just in all directions, an expanse of snowy, barren landscape with wind and darkness above. That does conclude the data for target 4B.
And now I will show you my first visual for CICO 4B, Visual 1. So So here's my first visuals for CICO 4B, and I have a harsh, very harsh, natural environment. The feeling is very cold. I'm getting a lot of cold temperatures, and this is the ground. I'm getting, if it looks abstract, but this is the ground I feel walking on. It's very cold and soft, but still harsh at the same time. A lot of white and a lot of dense areas because it's like very irregular here. And the ground is very irregular and steep. So there's a lot of hills and holes, but majority everything is covered with ice. I'm getting an ice, snow type of feel. And it's just very hard to walk around. Now I'm moving on to my second visual for CICO 4B. Now here's my second visual for CICO 4B. I have this non-surface structure. The feel of the structure is very hard. It feels man-made as well. I'm getting a glass type of ice feel with this structure. Structures feel like it's made out of ice or glass because it's so clear and very gloss look like, but also like a mirror, matter of fact. There's also two subjects inside this structure. Structures seem very blank face like. Doesn't seem to have very clear facial features, but you can tell that they have a face, and the subjects seem to be in very tight clothing, and there seem to be flying or moving upward and downward. This object seems very circular at the top, very like a dome shape at the top, and also a dome shape at the bottom, but it's also like oval as well, the way it's so wide, and it's so hard. Like the object is very hard but very clear and very glass type. It's like a disc basically. And that's what I have for this visual. Now I'm moving on to my third visual for CICO 4B. So this is my last visual for CICO 4B. See, I got big hilltops, very white, very, very white. I'm getting lots of winds, lots of activity and movement above. Is one non-surface structure right here. So it seems to be moving away out from this whole environment. The environment is very natural. Like I said, very cold temperature, very cold here. And here's a harsh man-made structure here. Seems to be very, it seems to be damaged and seems broken. It feels like ice, like breakable, the way it's so not together anymore. A lot of snow is covering up this structure. I can't tell if it's honestly a structure or not because it's so covered and it looks so clear like ice, just like the non-surface structure. The structure just seems to be steady there, just every like minute it's breaking or whatnot. But I couldn't tell if this structure is part of the ground or part of another structure because the structure seems so it looks just like snow and ice, but it also could be maybe some particle of some man-made material because the structure is just so pointy and different types of shapes. And yet again, it's a very snowy environment. Lots of snows, lots of hills, mountains, and again, one object is in the air. And that's all I have for my 3rd visual for CICO 4B.
My basic gestalts here are land. I seem to have no water, no subjects here. It seems like a very, very harsh environment. There are rocks and seemingly one mountain here. Colors are gray and white, and my temperatures are very, very cool. You need a jacket here. All I see is cold, dry land with mountains. This is isolated. The place is isolated. There's hardly anything here. It's like I'm supposed to find something in this target, but there isn't really anything to find. So, probing for fire and ice. The fire happens, and then it's followed by the ice.
As you can see, our viewers described the targets for CICO 4A and CICO 4B exceptionally well. There should be no trouble with you seeing the correlation between the targets and the cryptocurrency adoption level given the target creation rules that were applied for this project. We made this CICO project very simple in this regard so that the application of the rules would be obvious. With the case for CICO 4A and Bitcoin on December 11, 2017, the target had lots of stuff in it, and all those elements perceived by the remote viewers told us that the adoption level for Bitcoin on that date was great. On the other hand, for CICO 4B, there was nothing in that target but barren, cold, snowy, and icy mountainous land, essentially nothing but a wasteland. And that told us that the adoption level for that failed cryptocurrency was terrible. We have more complicated rules that we also apply, such as rules that allow us to predict high and low prices for a forecast period. But the current CICO 4 project was designed to be as simple as possible so that you could see how the process works. We use variations in this same process for all of our economic forecasts, and that includes variations in the target creation rules for each forecast. This process of using one target to get information about something else is called masking in remote viewing research. Masking was originally developed by the United States military in their original remote viewing programs, and we have further developed this process to allow for more detailed levels of information. And now, please remember our important disclaimer. No one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor, so anything that anyone at Farsight does that relates to using remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the selling prices of cryptocurrencies, is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone doing investments are doing so at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees or warranties being made, either expressed or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and I personally believe that after we do this for a while, it will be hard for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. I hope you get a chance to watch many of our other work at Farsight, including our 3-month forecast for specific cryptocurrencies, as well as our mysteries and time cross projects. We continue to make modifications to our forecasting methods as we go along, keeping things that are appropriate given our research, adding new analysis elements, and improving the rest. You learn all about that stuff by watching what we do. May you follow your own intuitions, make wise investment decisions, and become rich. Thank you for supporting our efforts at Farsight. Together, we will change the world for the better. I'm Courtney Brown, Director of the Farsight Institute.